Good morning, the Ambassador of Colombia here.
Good morning, Guillermo. Great to have you with us. We're just about to go, so great you're on board with us. Thank you for coming. This is Geraldine.
I believe you were mute.
Just saying good morning, Guillermo. We're ready to go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great welcome that we give you. Fáilte roimh in our native Irish language to this event this morning to look at the real role, the practical role that women peace builders play on the ground every day in securing international peace. I want to thank our co-host, the missions of Colombia, our Ambassador of Colombia who's with us, our South African and Ugandan colleagues who will speak to us a bit later, of course, UN Women and the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. I'm Geraldine, the Irish Permanent Representative, and delighted to be with you this morning. Last year, when the Irish mission was looking ahead to this week, the 20th anniversary, we wanted to see what we can do in a very Irish and pragmatic way to actually advance the discussions we're having in a concrete, tangible way on the role of grassroots women peace builders. We decided we would get to work, roll our sleeves up, and look at what the real issues are that are faced on a day-to-day basis by grassroots women peace builders. And we published today a report which brings out a number of our own findings on that. You'll find an online link to that report today as we finish. But it's not about publishing reports. We know that. It's not about passing resolutions. It's not about long speeches. What we want today to be about is about listening to those who know best, those who are actually working on the ground. We want to join in identifying in a clear-eyed way essentially what these persistent roadblocks are after 20 years of this extraordinary innovative resolution 1325. We know there are obstacles still in our way to allowing grassroots women peace builders to do their job on behalf of all of us. We want to see what the roadblocks are, what the nature of these roadblocks are, and more importantly, what we can do to address them. The report you'll see later in the day pulls no punches. It essentially states clearly, shines a light on a very disappointing reality that we face, that you as women peace builders online with us today face every day. I mentioned just 3 areas. One, the really clear lack of joined up work between what you do at a local level, what happens nationally, and then the much more, as we might say in Ireland, highfalutin visionary talk that goes on in the UN. We need to join up the work that's done. We're also seeing, secondly, now a new roadblock, an unexpected one in COVID. We're seeing that act as a serious break on what was already modest progress that we made on the WPS agenda, but also more generally on gender equality. We can't allow COVID to become a new roadblock. And then thirdly, in the report, we also highlight in a big way the concern we have about the threat to women human rights defenders, to women leaders, to women peace builders on the ground as they go about their day-to-day work. We need to support women in that work. We need to protect our women peace builders. So they're just 3 of the rather pragmatic points that we highlight in the report. So now we're going to get down to business. I'll just say a couple of words about how we'll organize ourselves this morning, and then we'll go straight to it. Zoom etiquette you're all familiar with. We have a chat box, and those of you who would like to take the floor, please indicate when you are ready that you would like to speak. And if you just identify yourself by your mission, if you're in New York, or your organization, if you're from civil society. I will do my best to keep this interactive, and we'll intersperse. We have superb panelists with us today, and we have a couple of amazing keynote speakers. Then we'll start to intersperse our contributions from the floor. If you keep to 2 minutes, we'll get lots of voices in, and I can see already that we're joined by a very big number. We have almost 200 participants already online. So let's try and make people feel that we're all included. We have French and Spanish interpretation. If you look at the little globe button on your toolbar, you'll be able to choose the language you prefer. So as I'm going to start, as I mean to continue, the first intervention this morning is just over 2 minutes long. It's a pre-recorded video from the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ireland, Simon Coveney. And just after he speaks, I will have the real honor of introducing our keynote speaker today, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, who will then be followed by another extraordinary speaker, the Executive Director of UN Women. So I'll get back to you once we've seen this 2.5-minute video from Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister of Ireland.
I'm delighted to be opening this event today to launch Ireland's report, Building Peace from the Grassroots, Learning from Women Peace Builders to Advance the WPS Agenda. I would like to acknowledge from the outset the strong partnership we enjoyed throughout this project with UN Women and the global network of women peace builders, and their vital work on WPS at what is a very challenging time globally. I would also like to thank our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, the Executive Director of UN Women, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support, and our panelists and contributors for joining us today. 2020 is an important anniversary year in the UN calendar, as we mark 75 years since the foundation of the UN, 25 years since the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action, and 20 years since the adoption of Resolution 1325. Significantly, it is also the year in which we are undertaking a review of the UN peacebuilding architecture. And so it is very timely that we in this event and report today hear directly from women peace builders progressing the WPS and sustaining peace agendas at the grassroots level. I hope that their insights and experience will inform policy discussions happening at the UN to ensure that we build on our successes and, more importantly, address the gaps over the next 20 years. In Ireland, we often say that for us, WPS is personal. It is particularly true when it comes to the role of women in peace building. We firmly believe that women's full, equal and meaningful participation isn't just desirable, it is essential. 4 years before the adoption of Resolution 1325, women in Northern Ireland fought for a place at the negotiating table. Because of their efforts and determination, the Good Friday Peace Agreement was made stronger and more enduring. Their vital work in sustaining a hard-won peace continues today. From Belfast to Bogota, women are on the front line of peace building, as well as the pandemic response, and we can learn so much from their experiences. Ireland is pleased to facilitate this exchange today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister Coveney. And now gives me a great personal as well as professional honour and sense of satisfaction indeed to introduce the Chair of the Elders, former High Commissioner for Human Rights and the first woman President of Ireland, Mary Robinson. Mary, you're a role model for so many of us, a global role model, I would say. And we are just so grateful that you continue to rock this system for us on our behalf in what you say and what you do. I wanted, as I give you the floor, Mary, to tell you that in all of the work in this last week, I have not forgotten your dear friend, Evan Boland, Ireland's poet, who said very pointedly on the floor of the UN when she was here under 2 years ago, our future will become the past of other women, and everything we do here today testifies to that. So I consider Evan accompanies us as you take the floor, Mary.
Thank you, Geraldine, and good morning to everyone in New York. It is very good that despite COVID-19, there are significant events to mark the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 1325. On the 14th of October, just 12 days ago, I took part in an event called Women Can't Wait, hosted by the Northern Ireland Women's European Platform and the Northern Ireland Assembly, which Elizabeth Law will recall as she was a moderator. It was great to see many of those women peace builders from Northern Ireland whom I had interacted with as president and who remembered those visits to my official residence in Dublin, Orasan Uachtaráin. And they also remembered my own visits to Northern Ireland, in particular to Catholic Republican West Belfast in 1993. At the time, neither the British nor the Irish government wanted me to go there, but you have to take risks for peace if you want to make peace. So I'm very glad to participate today in the launch of the excellent report on building peace from the grassroots, involving case studies from local women peace builders in Colombia, Northern Ireland, South Africa, and Uganda. I congratulate the Irish government, the Global Network of Women Peacekeepers, GNWP, and UN Women for this collaboration and the important recommendations. I was really struck by the seriousness of the 6 challenges identified and how they were exacerbated by COVID-19. I strongly support the emphasis that the women interviewed placed on, and I quote, the need for deep structural changes, which will create a culture more conducive to peace and to women's meaningful participation. They really summed it up by saying that means having women with a seat at the table. So let me just share some of my own experience in support of Security Council Resolution 1325. In February 2013, I was surprised with a phone call and was appointed by then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon as his special envoy for the Great Lakes region in Africa. And he told me at the time that I was the first woman to be appointed as a senior mediator in a conflict situation. So it was very clear to me that I had to do it in a special way. I had to somehow try to do it differently and try to strengthen the role and place of women and strengthen women, peace and security. It couldn't be just talk, it had to be action. The Great Lakes region, as I'm sure you all know, has been plagued by decades of political instability, armed conflicts, and humanitarian crises. And the use of rape as a weapon of war in the context. The degree and methods and viciousness of the use of sexual violence have all been well documented. So my role as Special Envoy would involve formulating a plan of action for the 13 heads of state to implement a framework of hope with the goal of moving towards sustainable peace in the region. These heads of state were, of course, all men. And when I asked them each to nominate a suitable candidate to plan and guide the oversight mechanism for the framework, all of them nominated men. So how to mitigate this clear gender imbalance? We just had to do more. We had to change approach. The first thing I did was enlist the help of my longtime friend, Binta Diop, because she had become the special envoy of the chair of the Commission of the African Union on Women, Peace and Security. I nominated her in my own right as a member of this oversight mechanism, and she did her best. But what can one woman do with 13 men? And so one of the things we did was recognizing that women in the region had been subjected to extreme brutality, including sexual violence during the conflict, but also cared for their families and emerged as leaders. We decided to form a platform of grassroots women, and I had the help of the Global Fund for Women. The 4 countries we selected were the core countries of the region: the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. And we were lucky enough to be able to also enlist the ministers of gender of those 4 countries. We actually more or less introduced those ministers to each other so they would be part of it, so that we would particularly hear their voices and their concerns on peace and security. I feel then, and I still feel today, a particular responsibility to the mothers, daughters, and grandmothers who, since my first visit, in fact, as president of Ireland to the region in 1994, have shared with me what they have suffered, whether it was in Bujumbura, in Bukavu, in Goma, in Kigali, or Kinshasa, or elsewhere. And I feel the same for all women displaced from their homes due to violent conflict or climate change or poverty or any other of the myriad factors driving the current wave of the mass movement of people across the globe. The impacts of these crises and conflicts are never gender neutral. COVID-19 is no exception. The pandemic has resulted in increased rates of violence against women and has exacerbated challenges in accessing justice. Women are losing their livelihoods faster than men. Millions of women are assuming disproportionate responsibilities for caregiving. Many women have found themselves unable to access contraception and other sexual and reproductive health services. UN experts predict, and this breaks my heart, that as many as 13 million more child marriages could take place in the next 10 years because of COVID-19 shutdowns of schools and family planning services, combined with increasing economic challenges. In all these situations, there is a fundamental truth. Women's voices need to be heard, respected, and believed. And that's why it's so important to reaffirm the value of Council Resolution 1325. Use it as the guiding principle for peace building and conflict resolution efforts across the world, and empower women at every level of society to fulfill both their own potential and that of the resolution itself. Now, more than ever, we need to think differently about justice and gender equality. As the world charts a course for post-pandemic future, we need to draw on our collective strength, rethink, reset, and build a better world for future generations. This collective strength, creativity, and innovation will be essential as we emerge from the crisis and, in the words of the UN, build back better. We need a recovery that is fully aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, and that the commitment to gender equality and parity of decision-making is at its very core. I want to be short at this stage, and I want to really end by saying that today's crisis reveals fundamental truths about what it is to be human, to live, and to live more closely than ever with family and neighbors, and to die, and to share our lives with others. So I'd like to end with words that I've often quoted from a good friend and mentor of mine, Wangari Maathai, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on peace and the environment. She said, "In the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called upon to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground. I absolutely believe that moment is now, and I look forward very much to our conversation.
Thank you so much indeed, Mary, leaving us in no doubt about the scale of what you describe as a moral challenge, as well as a fundamental truth. So thank you so much. And I know, Mary, you're going to stay with us, and that a little bit later you will come back at the end to say a couple of words. Thank you so much. Now I have the real pleasure of introducing another incomparable woman leader, our dear friend from Celia Nabata, who comes to us today from South Africa. So we're very appreciative from Celia, the UN Women Executive Director and a dear friend of Ireland, but of course a key champion for this agenda. We're really honoured you could join us today from Celia, and I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Excellencies, fellow panelists, dear Mary, it's wonderful to see all of you. Thank you so much for your words, which always get straight to the point. It's a pleasure for me and for UN Women to be partnering with the global network of women peace builders and our dear friends, the Irish government. Thank you, Geraldine, for thinking of us and for including us in this endeavor. Thank you for the report, which again adds the data and the information that is needed in order for us to take pragmatic steps moving forward. And one common thread from the discussions in Colombia, Uganda, South Africa, and Northern Ireland is that women get things done and they get results. We've seen this across these 4 contexts. We have seen how many women leaders crossed boundaries and parties to forge partnerships upon which peace was built. One thing that has been unique about women is that they are not held back by the intransigence of wanting to settle a score. They are willing to put their communities first and look at the way of solving solution in such a way that they get results for those communities. It is therefore even the more worrisome that women still have to knock at the door, even today, without the doors opening willingly for them, in order for them to be at a table where they are enablers of the peace process, and the peace in which women have participated does last longer and is more durable. So to keep women out of peace processes is indeed detrimental to all of us. Women also take these initiatives almost in most cases at great risk to themselves. Their efforts to transform the conditions in conflict areas is something that personally puts their own lives at risk. And during COVID, these conditions were exacerbated. Women were trying to stay alive from conflict, trying to stay alive from COVID, and women were also trying to keep others alive. And of course, their burden of care and the work in general that they do increased significantly. In the Secretary General's report this year, you will note that he highlights that many grassroots peace builders have had their workloads triple, as many of them supported the pandemic response, caring for their families and continuing to do their work as peace builders. I'm glad that the Commission, the UN Peacebuilding Commission, in the review show that they have been more attentive to the situation of women, and I think they are showing the trend that we hopefully will see many following. I hope this recognition also will turn into concrete and targeted support that reaches grassroots women who needs it most. And Mary has said it very clearly that there's a need to bring the action and the resources right at the grassroots level and not far away in the stages and the forums at which many of us sit. One of the starkest trends we tracked for the CS Secretary General's report is also the continued lack of investment for gender equality in conflict settings. We have noted that bilateral aid to women's organizations in fragile or conflict-affected countries has stagnated at 0.2%. This is despite the essential role of women peace builders in promoting social cohesion and preventing conflict, particularly in the context of public health crisis that has threatened these fragile conditions. To be navigating a pandemic and navigating a conflict has been a challenge for many in conflict areas. And we have seen at the same time, in 2019 alone, global military expenditures reaching $1.9 trillion US, following the largest annual increase in a decade. This is a serious imbalance that needs to be addressed. The Secretary General has outlined 5 goals that we need to work on in order to make sure that we move the needle on women, peace, and security, and harness the agenda's potential to mitigate multiple challenges, including the recovery from the pandemic and the destabilizing impacts of the climate crisis. Firstly, the Secretary General calls on the inclusion and the participation of women. And speaking to us who are participating here amongst friends, we need to lead by example. The UN has to lead by example in including women in all the peace processes that the UN influences or lead. We need those who facilitate peace processes amongst the member states who are here to also in their own delegation to include women, because that's the only way we can be role models to those that we are trying to convince. Secondly, the Secretary General highlights the importance of defending women unconditionally and the defense that we need to mount in order to support the women human rights defenders. Thirdly, he highlights the need to challenge the rising global military spending. I think under COVID, all that is essential was made very clear to us. I think none of us recognize military spending as one of the greatest needs that human beings had in order for all of us to be kept alive and safe. And the fact that this is such a large percentage of the resources that are being outlaid at the expense of the needs that are real for women and humanity is something that the Secretary General challenges. And of course, he also raises the issue of the dwindling donor funding to gender equality, as well as to women in fragile contexts. I think if we have to be frank and honest to ourselves, we do come across as being more talk and not committed to really address the issue. When we see these kinds of numbers that we are seeing when it comes into supporting those that are feeling the pinch at the most and those that are in grassroots. And the 5th point that the Secretary General makes is the need to gather data, to launch a data revolution that fills the knowledge gap and leads to rapid action. And thank you, Alan, for your report, because indeed it also contributes to that space. We also would like to highlight the need to work with young women and to listen to young women, because they are an important force that has shown its mettle in this work of peace building. In closing, we have a lot to learn about the persistent vision, fortitude, from the outstanding panelists who are joining us today. And thank you for the organizers for choosing them to be the people we have to listen to today, and we have to learn so that we make the correct interventions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, dear Zile, and to all your colleagues at UN Women. It's been a pleasure and really constructive to be working again with UN Women preparing this report. I can tell you we hope to stay in a very close lockstep with you as Ireland moves to the Security Council. And this time next year, we will speak as a Security Council member, but very much under your guidance and direction, dear Zile. Thank you so much indeed. So now we're going to go to our first speaker from my colleague of UN ambassadors, our co-sponsor this morning, my dear friend, dear Guillermo de Soto Valderrama, the permanent representative of Colombia, a country that has done extraordinary work on the WPS agenda. So, dear Guillermo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Geraldine. Her Excellency Mary Robinson, I want to recognize also the Executive Director of UN Women, all the co-sponsors, my colleagues from South Africa, also the participants. It's a very, very good day for this important issue. I would like to thank the government of Ireland, especially for the invitation to participate and co-sponsor this event. The 20th anniversary of the Security Resolution 1325 provides an opportunity to reiterate the political commitment, consider concrete actions and scale up investment in gender equality. Colombia, like every other country in the world, faces the enormous challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our government has implemented comprehensive measures to safeguard people's health, provide support to the most vulnerable, reactivate the economy, and promote well-being for all. Colombia has been an example in the implementation of these resolutions. We do believe that political and economic empowerment and the promotion of women are indispensable for the achievement of a peaceful and inclusive society based on principle of legality, entrepreneurship, and equity. My government is convinced that the participation of women in priority it contributes not only to achieving the transformation that the legal policy proposed, but also to offering females, particularly in rural areas, conditions for them to achieve their economic autonomy and to get a better life. It facilitates the generation of workspaces and decent conditions that rate with the scale of violence that violate their rights. Madam Chair, after the signing of the 2016 Accord, which was recognized by the Secretary General as one of the most gender-inclusive agreements, the plan for the implementation will comprise with more than 500 indicators, including 51 regarding gender approaches policies. The aforementioned gender indicators are aligned with the resolution 1325. In this regard, the Colombian government has been working in a coordinated manner with the framework of the functions of the Interinstitutional Commission for the Incorporation of the Gender Approach. This commission is known as the Government High Gender Body. Likewise, the formulation of territorial approach development programs, which are the initiatives in 170 municipalities, most affected by violence and poverty, had the participation of more than 200,000 people, of whom 33% were female. The result was approximately 33,000 initiatives, of which 13% have the brand of rural women and gender. These initiatives are aligned with the Resolution 1325 and are aimed at benefiting women in key areas such as rural property, infrastructure, land projects, quality of health, and access and quality of education. The agent of reincorporation currently manages and articulates the interinstitutional implementation of the policy for the economic and social reincorporation of former FARC members, which include specific action for the development of reincorporation with the gender and rights-based approach. Those actions are framed in the following thematic phases: articulations and planning process. Second, community incorporation in the territory. Third, conditions for access to mechanisms and resources necessary for economic stabilization and development. And finally, conditions for access and attention to the fundamental integral rights of former FARC members and their families. The main challenge that Colombia has today remains for the participation of women in peacebuilding scenarios in its terms of security. Security for us is a very complex, and we have a commitment to advance on this issue. Actions by illegal armed groups and actors related to drug trafficking and illegal economies hinder the participation in the construction and consolidation of peace, particularly in affect the process of reincorporation, as well as those that are part of the National Comprehensive Program of Illicit Job Substitution. The government of Colombia has the weight commitment to promoting women and their participation in different political scenarios. In fact, for the first time, we have a female vice president. This government has the first joint cabinet in the history of Colombia, and for the first time, our national development plan includes a special chapter dedicated to women's equity. This development plan has among its objectives the creation of the national human system, which will bring together the policies and instruments to guarantee that the rights as part of the agenda of all branches of the public sector. Madam Chair, the women, peace, and security agenda is a priority for the government. We are pleased to be here today, sharing experiences and learning from each other. Once again, our gratitude to Ireland and the other co-sponsors and participants for this valuable space of discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed, Guillermo. I'm afraid some of us suffered a little bit of a sound quality issue as you were speaking. So I know that you had so much rich material to offer and share with us. So what we might ask you to do also, Guillermo, today is to allow us to circulate your remarks also to participants. But I wanted to say a big thank you, not just because of what Colombia has done in integrating women into the peace process, but also for the ongoing and cherished relationship that Ireland and Colombia enjoy. Thank you for being with us this morning, Guillermo. Really appreciate it. So we're now moving into the interactive part of our segment, and importantly, we will also hear now from the women peace builders. We're honoured to have with us today, who also contributed to the work of the report that we've referred to earlier. We're joined by Elizabeth Liz Law, if I may, who's now the chair of Northern Ireland Women's European Platform, has been involved for many, many years in ensuring that women's voices are heard in the peace process, not just in Ireland, but really internationally. We also have Becky from Uganda, who's online, a young Ugandan woman peace activist, who's a youth team leader as well. And I look forward to hearing from you. And Beatrice Quintero of Colombia, a well-known feminist activist who's dedicated her work to looking after the human rights of women in her own country and working internationally. So we're really delighted to have all of you. What we're going to do is introduce Liz first and hear from some remarks from her own unique perspective. And then to my colleagues who are online, I'm watching that we're getting a speaking list. We will intersperse remarks from the floor with our peace builders presentations so that we get a bit of a conversation going. I'll ask the contributors from the floor to be very brief. But first of all, it's an honor to hear from you, Liz, of the Northern Ireland Women's European Platform. You were a great help in our work today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you also to UN Women, to the Global Network and to the Irish Government for the consultation, for sharing it and for today amplifying women's voices from Northern Ireland. The consultation in Belfast was undertaken through the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs Consultative Group, which has a wide reach in Northern Ireland through networks of women in diverse communities and communities of interest, as well as mediators and others. And they identified a number of enduring barriers to the implementation of 1325 and to the Women, Peace, Security agenda in general. They said that women hadn't secured parity in participation in decision making. They gave the example of the Commission on Flags, Identity, Culture and Tradition that had only one woman member out of 15, though some women immediately responded in Belfast and by doing their own independent research to present to the Commission. There's a continuing failure to protect women and address conflict-related trauma in both the legacy of and the continuing conflict. And this is seen in violence against women and continuing coercive control in communities. In addition, the contested nature of equality itself severely limits preventative measures and means in terms of recovery, there's a real absence of a gender-sensitive base to public policy making. As one woman described it, gender neutrality or gender blindness is not an accident, but it's an aspiration. In general, women see a threat to the human rights and equality framework, and I think that's in common with many other areas across the world. An uncertainty for us compounded by the UK leaving the European Union or Brexit. And there are real concerns about securing the commitments to women's rights and gender equality in our peace agreement, the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement. All of this has been exacerbated and exposed by COVID-19, as well as the disproportionate impact on women as paid and unpaid carers, women's groups and networks that have over the years held communities together, provided the space for women's peace building work, yet never had sustained or consolidated report. They found themselves having to respond to direct and immediate need in their communities, as well as reshaping what they do and deal with the challenges for the delivery of their ongoing primary work in peacekeeping. Aside from this response in communities where people are looking out for each other, COVID, as well as Brexit, is divisive, and it provides space for paramilitaries to exercise further coercive control in communities. For example, there's anecdotal evidence that paramilitaries have coordinated distribution of food and essentials in order that they secure support and enhance their position. And as elsewhere, there's reduced access to safety in general. However, there's a strong and united women's movement that has historically found the common ground to work within. At the conference that President Robinson mentioned earlier this month, a woman reminded us of a time when a women's group in a Protestant area refused to accept groundbreaking funding from the local authority until the local authority reversed their decision not to fund the women's group in the neighbouring Catholic area. This unity and this problem solving is evidenced in the work of the Women's Policy Group, a coalition across women's NGOs and the trade unions in Northern Ireland. And they've set out a feminist recovery plan that addresses not only COVID, but the pre-existing challenges of austerity and Brexit. And this is in sharp contrast to government's first economic recovery plan, prepared without women's involvement and consequently without any mention of childcare. Briefly looking to the future, from the consultation came hope in Northern Ireland. Hope for an end to gender neutral policy making, gender sensitivity, instead creating the development of policy and practice based on gender parity. Hope for the delivery of services and support to women to address trauma and mental health issues. And this is vital for women, their families, and across society. And for consolidation of the equality and human rights and NGO framework itself. Women in Northern Ireland have learnt how to use international mechanisms. We've been quick to do that and to seize that and to look at how we can benchmark and define progress. This can be assisted by external actors, and we've benefited from work by agencies and by other countries over the years. But external actors can commit to providing a stronger oversight on delivery. And we in Northern Ireland can work within Northern Ireland in order to secure that and to see that those meet up. It's also important that the UN and others secure, maintain and develop the NGO space and support the transnational networks and sharing that are so valuable, as like we see today, for coming together. And yet these spaces are under so much pressure. And just one final comment, having had the space to look at the issues, the consultation suggested that we look in Northern Ireland at an intergenerational women's forum to share the lived experience of women in Northern Ireland from before and after the Good Friday Agreement as we work together for sustainable peace in Northern Ireland. So thank you for the consultation, for the opportunity to identify these issues, and I hope the opportunity to take some of these resolutions forward together as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Liz. And it's great to hear that you're bringing real live, up-to-date reality into the discussions we're having. We've always said we didn't want this conversation to be about looking back, it's very much looking forward. I think the note you end on in terms of intergenerational engagement, really important one. I hope some of us get back to that point. I'm sure President Robinson will, if I can anticipate that later on. So, thank you, Liz. We're now in the interactive phase, so I'm encouraging those colleagues who are online. I see a lot of friends and colleagues. Please raise your hand in the chat box if you want to come in. I'm going to give the floor now to one of our co-sponsors and the representative of my dear colleague, Ambassador Jerry Matia of South Africa. I know Jerry is in the Security Council this morning, but we have his colleague, Kauhilo Mogashoa, with us. And then my colleagues, the ambassadors of Egypt and Poland, want to take the floor to make comments. So I'm encouraging everyone to keep this moving. We'll hear then from, after those three speakers, we'll go back to our Peace Builder panelists and we'll go to Becky from Uganda. So first, Kauhilo from South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ireland for inviting us to co-sponsor this timely and important event alongside UN Women, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, Colombia and Uganda. This morning, the topic that we are conversing about this morning is extremely important for South Africa and underpins one of the key reasons why we have called on the full implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. I would like to also thank the keynote speakers, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, the ED, Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka of UN Women, and the panelists for their substantive and frank and insightful engagements. This year is a significant year as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1325, the 25th anniversary of Beijing Declaration, and Plan for Action, and the 75th anniversary of the signing of the Charter of the UN, as well as the 5th anniversary of the Sustainable Development Agenda, amongst others. It is also the review for silencing the guns in the African continent. These commemorations provide us an opportunity to reflect on progress, challenges, and gaps in order for us to take the agenda forward collectively. We continue to make use of this opportunity because women's efforts to ensure their participation in peace processes continue to be undermined. And if we fail to address the barriers in the next 20 years and beyond that, then we will fail to realize our objectives. Together, the UN, member states, regional organizations, civil society, and other actors supporting peace processes must hold each other accountable and to maintain and go beyond the current progress in the areas of the WPS agenda. It is within this context that South Africa saw it fit to present Resolution 2493 in October last year, focusing on full implementation of the WPS agenda. The resolution recognizes that although there has been great progress made, great opportunities still lie ahead of us. The resolution highlighted the importance of the implementation of the agenda and bringing to the fore the important role of women peace builders, mediators at grassroots level, and recognize the importance of the Peace Building Commission mandate, the gender strategy of the peace building, and called for its implementation to further promote women's participation in building efforts and to support the participation of women-led peace building organizations in planning and stabilization efforts in post-conflict reconstruction and recovery. We agree with today's event that gender responsive and conflict sensitive COVID-19 responses and recovery rooted in peace building priorities and principles must form part of the full and effective WPS implementation beyond the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325, especially as the pandemic poses many challenges and undermines the gains that we have made over the years. These commemorations we have all highlighted today will be hollow and only aspirational if we do not take steps to fulfill their objectives and implement the ideals and commitments that we made by adopting these landmark outcomes. In this regard, South Africa underscores the need for enhanced cooperation through better information sharing, coordination and cooperation between the UN regional and sub-regional organizations, as well as with civil society and women organizations to advance the cause of women's rights and the empowerment. We feel that closing the gaps in the implementation begins with empowering women builders everywhere through bringing the silos that exist between our institutions. Bridging the silos. My country, South Africa, views women, peace, and security agenda as a means for women to mediate in conflict situations and as essential to end the use of force as a means of settling disputes. In the context of today's discussions, this is essentially about creating a space for the voice and presence of women in peace and security activities and processes. This is also why South Africa conducts its annual training program with women peace builders to exchange best practices and hear from them about the opportunities, remaining gaps, and challenges to the full implementation of the WPS agenda and how governments, the private sector, and civil society can play a collaborative role. Today, as we exchange views on how to strengthen implementation of the WPS agenda, particularly as we move towards the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1325, it is also imperative for the international community to take into account the findings, including recommendations made in the 2015 global study on the implementation of Resolution 1325, which remains very relevant today, coupled with emerging challenges and challenges that undermine the full implementation of the agenda across the board. Dear colleagues, as I conclude, beyond 2020, And as correctly put by the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, at the WPS Open Debate in 2019 of October last year, our deliverables must be visible and discernible. They must be clearly aimed at ensuring the meaningful participation of women in all levels of peace processes. And this includes civil society stakeholders, increasing the number of women in uniformed and civilian components of peacekeeping operations, investing in women as peace builders, such as in mediation and negotiation, protecting the human rights of women, particularly sexual and reproductive health rights, and advancing accountability for heinous crimes such as sexual violence. I would like to take this opportunity once again, Ambassador Nelson, for giving us this opportunity for inviting us to co-sponsor this the engagement that we have had today. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed to South Africa. We all recall the extraordinary role South Africa played last year as President of the Security Council in October, with really some excellent discussions. So thank you for that. I now have the real pleasure and honor of giving the floor to my colleague, Mohammed Idris, the Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Egypt, who will be followed by my colleague, Joanna, of the Ambassador of Poland. And I'll ask you both to keep a watch on the clock, and we will leave all niceties aside if we can as we go. So Mohammed, it's an honor to be on the screen with you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, dear Geraldine. It's my great honor. And watching the time, let me just start by thanking the missions of Ireland, Colombia, and South Africa for organizing this high-level meeting, and of course, expressing our appreciation for the messages of the Honorable Prime Minister of Ireland, iconic Her Excellency Mary Robinson, and the ED of the UN Women, and the speeches from the co-organizers. I think it couldn't be more timely to have this high-level meeting. We have this tripartite important occasions, 75th anniversary of UN, 25th anniversary of Beijing Declaration, and the 20th anniversary of adoption of the landmark resolution 1325. This is a very important opportunity, not only to celebrate, but take stock of the implementation of the WPS agenda and to develop actionable recommendations for overcoming persisting challenges to its implementation. Egypt believes that advancing women's meaningful participation requires inclusive approach, incorporating both the elite, well-educated and trained women, as well as capacity building as for women at the grassroots level, whose challenges to participation are important, and they need to be acknowledged and addressed, and their voices to be here. Advocating women, peace and security agenda, I think, is about empowering women to have meaningful contributions to peacekeeping, peacekeeping, and women should be empowered through having access to peace processes and through training and capacity building and engaging in substantially in political issues. Lots of linkages and synergies comes to this agenda to be fully implemented at the societal level. Also, to promote it and advocate it at the global level, lots of synergies and the linkages need to be happening also within the UN system. When it comes to Africa, we have lots of success stories. The ED of the UN Women talked about this, and she herself is among those success stories. And we have the FemWise of Africa, the African Network of Women Mediators. So lots of success stories. And when I had the honor to be Vice President of the Peace Building Commission under the presidency of my dear brother Ambassador Guillermo, we went together to the Mano River countries and we watched on the ground live how women are contributing really significantly to peacemaking and peacekeeping. Let me conclude by mentioning that last December, Egypt hosted the Aswan Forum for Peace and Development, aiming to have the nexus between peace and development, and the forum focused on advancing the implementation of women, peace and security agenda in Africa. And the second edition of the forum is going to be virtually next February before it will be hopefully resumed in person in the following year. The last point is about the, if I would ask something about the capacity building programs, the nature of capacity building programs needed in this field, and how far they are having, how far they are implemented on the ground, and how far they need to be evolved and developed. Thank you very much, dear Geraldine.
Thank you very much indeed, Mohammed, and you did a wonderful job of sticking to a 3-minute intervention, and importantly also reminding us of the great work you did in the PBC. I now have the real honor also, my friend and fellow European Ambassador, Joanna Wronecka, who was a wonderful ambassador for Poland on the Security Council. Joanna, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Geraldine, and congratulations for organizing this very important meeting. And thank you for allowing me to speak. I will be very short, I hope, but allow me to share with you a few thoughts. Women peacebuilders are courageous and effective leaders, building the bridges to end violence and bring the communities together. Their work is difficult and dangerous. We pay tribute to the work of the 3 peacebuilders here with us and all other women engaged in peace processes in the world. In 2000, grassroots women peacebuilders were the inspiration behind UN Security Council Resolution 1325, that for the first time in history called for the inclusion of women in matters of peacebuilding and peacekeeping. Evidence proves that women's inclusion increases the quality and sustainability of peace processes, but they are still absent from one track, the negotiations. Since 1992, women only account for 3% of mediators on peace agreements. Acknowledging the existence, skills, influence, values, and approaches of women peacebuilders is a necessary preliminary step to ensure their rightful and systematic place at the tables of negotiations and decision-making and foster future peace around the world. Allow me to say a few words about Poland. Poland is committed to the implementation of Women, Peace and Security Agenda as a non-permanent member. In 2018-19, we have been a strong proponent of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. In 2018, Poland has adopted its first national action plan on women, peace and security. The document sets out the framework for Poland's implementation of 8 UN Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security, and focuses on the need to increase women's participation in peace processes, peace building missions and operations. Poland advocates for enhanced participation of women in peace operations at all levels and in all areas of expertise. In this spirit, since Poland has re-engaged, thanks to also a very good cooperation with Ireland in the UN peacekeeping operations in 2019 in UNIFIL, we have attached particular importance to significant participation of women in our contingent in UNIFIL. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed, Joanna, and indeed our peacekeepers are cooperating on the ground, and that's a whole important aspect of our growing relationship. Thank you. So we're now going to go back to our rhythm with our peace builders and to hear from that young voice from Uganda. Becky, you have the floor.
Good evening. I have been coordinator for the
Becky, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having trouble hearing you. If you could just keep the mic a bit stationary and we might hear from you.
Yes. Right now.
Becky, we're having trouble hearing you, so I'm going to ask the technicians to offline have a discussion with Rebecca, and I will go, in fact, to the next speaker until we rectify the sound problems we're having with Becky, who's been patiently waiting, and I know has tested her system over the weekend. So I'm very hopeful we'll fix that in a moment, Rebecca. Our next speaker is Celia Nabata, who's speaking on behalf of the delegation of Uganda. If you'd like to take the floor, Celia, and we'll come back to Rebecca as soon as we have a clear signal.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver a statement by His Excellency Ambassador Adonia Ayebare, Permanent Representative of Uganda to the UN. Uganda is pleased to co-host this high-level event on women peacebuilders. Our appreciation goes to the Permanent Mission of Ireland for its contribution and support to this important initiative of championing the empowerment of women in peacebuilding. We recognize the role of the UN in supporting women in peace and security, especially through the adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Uganda, having experienced one of the longest internal conflicts which took place in northern Uganda from 1986 to 2006, has learned lessons in terms of conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and post-conflict reconstruction. This conflict had adverse effects on the most vulnerable sections of our population, particularly women and children, who experienced mass displacements, destruction of families, abject poverty, physical injuries, sexual abuse, and death. Based on this experience, women assumed diverse roles in efforts to end the conflict. These roles included joining the armed forces to contribute to the promotion of peace and security, engaging in negotiations and mediation, as well as working as community peace builders. Women also played a prominent role in supporting war-affected people, including staying with families as caregivers in homes and communities. Women played a direct role supporting a negotiated settlement in conflict, including playing active roles in the protracted peace talks. While behind the scenes, they worked tirelessly to dissuade their husbands, sons, and other relatives from actively engaging in armed or violent rebellion. This was vital in building sustainable peace. Madam Chair, in post-conflict recovery, women formed and joined community-based organizations and local NGOs to address consequences of war. They positively contributed to addressing internal displacement resulting from the conflict and promoted sustainable return of IDPs to their places of origin. Their roles in promoting reconciliation, reintegration, and supporting psychosocial as well as other problems was crucial in addressing the scourge of war. Madam Chair, Uganda has mainstreamed the participation of women in peacekeeping operations, as well as at the regional level, especially in Somalia. For instance, in the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, there are 63 women officers deployed under the UN Guard unit, while several other women police and army officers are deployed in other areas under AMISOM. In addition, Ugandan police women officers have been deployed elsewhere as individual police officers in various UN peacekeeping missions. Finally, Madam Chair, Uganda remains committed to supporting efforts to enhance the important role of women in prevention, resolution of conflicts, peace negotiations, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response, and in post-conflict reconstruction. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. And we're still working in the background with Becky. So I'm now going to go to our Swiss colleague, Dominique Favre, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland, followed by Beatrice, the colleague, the peace builder from Colombia, and then we'll come back to Becky. So Dominique, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and congratulations for this excellent event. And thank you very much to Madam Robinson and to the ED Bumsile for their remarks, and for all the panelists. It's a very qualitatively an excellent event. We are very proud and happy to be here with you. I will focus on just 2-3 points for time constraints, but the major point that I would like to make is the necessity to advocate for a greater inclusion of women's association and the civil society, domestically and in our peace building efforts in partner countries. This is why, for instance, Switzerland is supporting since 2015 the Peace Circles project in Mali. This is a dialogue project that enables women in the communities to increase their knowledge of the peace process and use their expertise to contribute to national reconciliation and social cohesion. We are also convinced that gender-sensitive analysis is key to women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace processes. We need to be guided by such analysis to know which actors to engage with and which topics need to be discussed. The lack of availability of gender disaggregated data is a major concern, as we are preparing for the UN World Data Forum in 2021 that will take place in Bern. We keep this issue high on the radar. We must also ensure an enabling and safe environment for civil society representatives to carry out their work and cooperate with the UN system, including the Security Council. All member states have a duty to prevent and respond to any cases of intimidation and reprisals and ensure accountability when these acts occur. So thank you very much. And as a member of the WPS Focal Points Network, maybe before closing, maybe before closing, I would like to draw your attention to another side event that will take place on the 30th of October with UN Women. So we stay engaged. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dominique. And I think all of us online recognize the really extraordinary role that Switzerland plays championing these issues. So thank you very much for being with us. I now have the real pleasure to give the floor to Beatrice Quintero, who comes to us from Colombia, who's been patiently waiting. Beatrice is comes from the National Women's Network of Colombia, and she has really played a pivotal role, I know, in peace building and advancing women's political participation in our country. I gather, Beatrice, you're going to speak to us in Spanish, so I would recommend everyone just checks their interpretation on the globe and that you select the language you prefer. You have the floor, Beatrice.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Saludo al gobierno de Irlanda y a la señora Robinson de manera muy especial, y a la directora ejecutiva de ONU Mujeres, la señora Mlambo, y a mis queridas colegas de GNWP, con la que hemos estado trabajando durante mucho tiempo en este proceso de la resolución 1325. En noviembre de este año, Colombia celebra los 4 años de la firma del acuerdo de paz con la guerrilla de las FARC. El primer año, o sea 2017, fue dedicado a definir la normatividad necesaria para esa implementación. 2018 y 19 fue el proceso de implementación territorial del acuerdo. Como ustedes saben, este fue un acuerdo que tuvo un enfoque de género muy importante. Y nosotras, como organizaciones de feministas y de mujeres, hemos estado trabajando para asegurar que la implementación del enfoque de género sea efectiva. Según los diferentes informes que se han hecho desde los componentes internacionales, el mismo gobierno y la sociedad civil, podemos decir que hay avances, aunque no suficientes. Además, la implementación del enfoque de género ha sido aún más lenta. En marzo de este 2020 llega la pandemia del COVID-19, que ha servido como una disculpa adicional para disminuir tanto la implementación del acuerdo de paz como la implementación del enfoque de género. La pandemia por COVID-19 y las medidas para enfrentarla afectan a todas las personas, las comunidades, las sociedades, aunque no de igual manera. Las mujeres y las niñas, en especial de grupos históricamente discriminados, como de pueblos étnicos y LGBT, sufren un daño diferenciado y desproporcionado. Esto es, por ser mujeres en contextos con desigualdades y exclusiones construidas dentro del patriarcado. Entre el 25 de marzo y el 2 de julio, la línea 155, que se dedica a recibir llamadas para orientar sobre violencia intrafamiliar, tuvo un incremento de 230% en el número de llamadas. Debido a este aumento de la violencia intrafamiliar y los feminicidios, la respuesta gubernamental en Colombia sobre las medidas para mitigar los efectos de la pandemia han sido especialmente en la prevención y atención de las violencias contra las mujeres, las niñas y los niños. Las mujeres gastan en trabajo no remunerado alrededor de 7 horas diarias, mientras que los hombres solo gastan 3.2 horas al día en estas labores. Y con la pandemia se vieron enfrentadas a una mayor carga de trabajo doméstico no remunerado debido a las medidas de aislamiento preventivo que cerraron los colegios y suspendieron los servicios domésticos remunerados. Estamos convencidas de que para evitar la ampliación de las brechas de desigualdad de género en el contexto presente, se deben implementar medidas afirmativas que aceleren la efectividad de las medidas de carácter general, no solo las referentes a la violencia contra las mujeres y el trabajo de cuidado, sino en todas las políticas públicas sobre educación, trabajo, vivienda, etc. Los últimos datos del Departamento Nacional de Estadísticas, DANE, muestran que las condiciones laborales de las mujeres en Colombia han desmejorado dramáticamente con la pandemia. La población más afectada son las mujeres entre 25 a 54 años. En este grupo de edad, dos mujeres perdieron el empleo por cada hombre que perdió el suyo. La tasa de desempleo para las mujeres hoy es 24% y para los hombres 15%. Adicionalmente, el aumento del trabajo doméstico no remunerado les ha impuesto a las mujeres más limitaciones para buscar empleo y por lo tanto las ha forzado a estar inactivas económicamente. En julio se registró un aumento de 1.9 millones de mujeres inactivas, de las cuales el 94% se dedicaron a oficios del hogar. Un asunto del que se habla poco, pero para nosotras como feministas es muy importante, es el acceso a los servicios en salud sexual y reproductiva, incluyendo el acceso a la interrupción voluntaria del embarazo. La virtualidad de los trámites implica que no todas las mujeres puedan solicitar fácilmente estos servicios. Esto dificulta el acceso para aquellas mujeres que habitan en contextos rurales y aquellas que se encuentran en situación de vulnerabilidad socioeconómica, como son las mujeres migrantes, quienes no tienen redes de apoyo en Colombia para delegar las labores del cuidado. En el acceso a los servicios de interrupción voluntaria del embarazo en el contexto de la pandemia generada por el COVID, se aumentaron las barreras y teniendo en cuenta el aumento de las relaciones sexuales, consentidas o no, y el incremento de la violencia contra las mujeres debido a las medidas de confinamiento, se aumentan las posibilidades de embarazos no deseados. Para terminar, quiero dejar como conclusión solo 3 puntos. Primero, la Red Nacional de Mujeres, como organización comprometida con la promoción, defensa y exigibilidad de los derechos de las mujeres, niñas y adolescentes, invita al Gobierno Nacional y a los gobiernos territoriales para que con las organizaciones de mujeres y la comunidad internacional se comprometan a sostener los avances alcanzados durante las décadas anteriores frente a los derechos de las mujeres y a continuar construyendo sociedades más justas e igualitarias que no dejen a ninguna niña ni mujer atrás. Segundo, por esta razón debemos exigir una estructuración del sistema de cuidado como un sector de la economía reconocido formalmente con su consecuente y justa valoración social y económica. Y tercero, como dice el informe que estamos hoy, dijéramos, lanzando, elaborado conjuntamente por GNWP, ONU Mujeres y la Embajada de Irlanda, a las mujeres constructoras de la paz les preocupa que la pandemia de COVID-19 lleve a la despriorización y eliminación de fondos del trabajo de consolidación de la paz y la implementación de las agendas Mujer, Paz y Seguridad, Para nosotras en Colombia es importante que con la disculpa de la pandemia no se disminuya el proceso de la implementación de los acuerdos de paz, sino que se renueve el compromiso de su cumplimiento efectivo, incluyendo el enfoque de género. Muchas gracias.
Beatrice, thank you so much indeed. That was a very inspirational set of remarks and reminding us that we cannot take the risk of COVID getting in our way above all now. So I'm going to try now to give the floor to our friend Becky in Uganda. You have the floor now, Becky. Hopefully we can hear you.
A very good evening to you. Can everybody hear me? I have been the prevention of gang violence coordinator for Uganda in the district of Kampala. And as a young woman, one of the things we've noticed is that is hindering or barring WAP's implementation in Uganda is the social, cultural, religious norms that are around, where women are not part of decision-making spheres, or even when they make a contribution, they are not acknowledged. And especially the young women, they are still put behind. And even when they bring up their ideas, they are used and documented by as for community and not disaggregated into young women. And this is a contribution of young women. But we also have the challenge that there is a lot of mental health gaps, especially for women peace builders that have been and in challenging situations and are still facing traumas that have been onto their own lives, or while helping promote peace in the community. There is also a gap of intergeneration, whereby you find that the skills that the older women peace builders have are not transmitted to the younger women, and that gap causes a lot of lack of information, and there are mistakes that younger women make in that regard. COVID has brought a new era and a new approach towards peace building, especially for young women. It has been a new thing that we have experienced as a country. You find that women were trying to stay alive, but at the same time could not be able to intervene in certain peace processes. But we also were lucky to see more young women in the UPDF, and we ask the government to be able to document the women that are serving in peacekeeping forces and also promote them, because we see the men tend to be at the higher rank. We also realized that the women were trying to find coping mechanisms, especially the young women started up groups or shelters for women that were being battered, and that is one of the ways that women coped up. However, in affecting our work, we had to use something like Zoom to have to communicate, data to communicate. How about the woman that is a peace builder that is in the rural areas of Amudat that cannot even access a smartphone? That was one of the major challenges that we would have, is that the communication channels were cut and there was isolation. What would be the call to the international community is to hold our governments accountable in regards to having more women peace builders protected, documented, and also for under the women that are in peacekeeping, given unto the ranks and given the due recognition that they've actually worked for more than the men. We also ask that there is an increase in funding for women peace builders activities, and also capacity enhancement for the younger women to be able to do mediation and negotiation, and also sit on these negotiation and mediation tables. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm glad that we waited to hear from you. You made some very important points and called our attention to the realities on the ground. Rural women face a particular challenge when it comes to connectivity, and therefore to being in a position to express their views, and certainly young women doubly so. So thank you for that excellent contribution. So now we're at the stage where we've heard from our three peace builders who cooperated in the presentation. If any of them would like to pop back in with a specific point at this stage, otherwise, if they signal that in the chat box, I'm going to give the floor now to our other great co-sponsor in all of this, Beatrice Cabrera, a dear friend of the Irish Mission, the CEO of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. Your team drove the research forward, and your network, we know, amplifies the voices of the women we have with us, not just today, but those across the globe who are trying to do that groundbreaking work. It's always great to be on screen and on a project with you, Beatrice. So I give you the floor now.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Ambassador Beatrice. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I add my thanks to our co-organizers, the Permanent Mission of Ireland, as well as the Permanent Missions of Colombia, South Africa, and Uganda, and of course, UN Women. But most especially, my big thanks go to Beatrice, Rebecca, and Elizabeth, the Women Peace Builders on this panel, and those who participated in our consultations and interviews, the project that was generously supported by Ireland and UN Women. Thank you for the privilege of working with you. Greetings, President Robinson and USG Mlambo Nguka. It's my utmost honor to be on the same panel with you. The title of this panel, Learning from Grassroots Women Peace Builders, Advancing the Women Peace and Security Agenda Beyond 2020, cannot be more apt. All of our discussions on the Women Peace and Security resolutions here in New York would only be meaningful if they make a positive difference in the lives of local women peace builders and local populations who live and confront conflict and their impacts every single day. The United Nations, member states, and the rest of the international community needs to walk the talk on the Women Peace and Security agenda, this 2020 and beyond. Many of the recommendations put forth by the Women Peace Builders we consulted and interviewed for our research are not new, but they take on a renewed urgency in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Women Peace Builders have concrete ideas on how to fulfill those recommendations. In our research report, they identified innovative and nuanced examples of good practices and locally driven solutions that need to be recognized, supported, amplified, and replicated. Now, more than ever, it is time for the international community to talk less and instead listen more and learn from local women peace builders. Even though COVID-19 has created unprecedented challenges for women peace builders around the world, it has also become a moment that further highlights local women's resilience and leadership capacities. In Colombia, women's organizations have maintained systematic coordination and collaboration even during the pandemic. They have adapted to virtual modes of working and have remained connected. They disseminate timely and factual information about the pandemic, the preventative measures, as well as emerging threats. In Cauca Department, for example, Women Peace Builders, with support from our organization, the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, and Red Nacional de Mujeres, continued their advocacy, which led to the inclusion of provisions related to the implementation of the peace agreement with the FARC in local development plans. Our research also shows clear examples of how women's participation makes COVID-19 response and recovery more effective and better suited to address local needs. For example, in Uganda, one of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders partners is a member of the local COVID-19 response task force. She organized consultations with women in local communities in Kitgum district. The consultation generated recommendations, including the setting up of an emergency fund for women during this health crisis. Yet, our report also shows that despite the value that local women bring, they remain excluded. And our panelists have also underscored this. From COVID-19 task forces, they remain excluded in police and other security forces, And most importantly, they remain excluded in overall decision-making and political affairs. When we ask what is needed to include more women in decision-making, the Colombian women told us, we need to change the culture. We need to do away with toxic masculinity and the over-militarized approaches to security. I believe the same advice applies to ensuring the meaningful participation of women in peace negotiations, in the implementation of peace agreements, and in monitoring mechanisms. They also apply to women's representation in parliaments, in judicial and executive branches of governance. We need to change the policy and the decision-making culture and shift from hard, state-centric, militarized approaches to security, to prevention-based, community-driven human security approaches. Changing political culture also requires reducing military spending and instead investing more in women peace builders. And I thank USG Mlambo Nguka for also highlighting the Secretary General's point on this. It requires funding women peace builders activities and organizational strengthening. Funds that are given to women peace builders are not just project expenditures. They are an investment in women's empowerment, in women's movement, feminist movement building towards a successful implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda towards sustainable and inclusive peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, dear Mavit. And I have to say, if I have a regret about the extraordinary discussion this morning, it's been that we haven't heard more voices from civil society. I've been watching the chat and we're hearing, we're getting questions. We've had questions in the chat, but about women, particularly with disabilities, about the impact of COVID on food security and the challenges women face now in their societies and their communities on the ground, and also an important question around how we can address, and Mavit, you touch on this, how we can address the disproportionate expenditure on military spending relative to the important work we have to do on security in general and human security in particular. So there are a whole complex of issues that civil society are raising with us in the background. Before I go back to President Robinson for a final few remarks, my colleague Sima Bahouz from Jordan is with us, and I'd love if she would say a couple of words to us as we begin to wrap up what has been an excellent discussion. Sima, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Geraldine. And thank you very much, everybody who has been, all the panelists and all the speakers who have been on this morning. As we mark the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1325, we in Jordan recognize the progress made as well as the great opportunities and the great challenges also that still lie ahead. I want to say that in Jordan, we have endorsed our plan for WPS 2020-2025, and there is a lot of activity to say that to ensure that women are and continue to be the peace builders that they are in their communities. We also believe much in the participation of women and also in the importance of political reform that can bring about the participation of women in different areas and different places, including in our country. Also, you have spoken, many of you, about changing the culture. Yes, changing the culture is important, and we believe that through plans like this and through a lot of advocacy and as well as the training and capacity building, we will be able to inch into the changing the culture towards acceptance of women working on peace building and on peacemaking. As a country that has received a lot of refugees, as you know, and that is surrounded by a crisis around us, it is also important to keep social cohesion in the communities, to keep social cohesion within host communities and the refugee communities. And this is also an important part that is being played by women, whether they are women from the host community or women from the refugee camps and so on and so forth. So investing in women's power, investing in empowering women, investing in making sure that women in conflict and that women who are on the move and that women who have been displaced are also empowered to be able to continue to keep the peace within them and the peace within their communities is extremely important. I think we urge also all of us, we urge more participation of civil society, as you have mentioned, Geraldine, just now, and everyone else, because it is more important than ever not to leave anyone behind and to ensure that the voice of civil society is being heard. As you know, in Jordan, our Commission on Women is half civil society, half government. So we feel that we are moving forward towards more inclusion of civil society in our work towards empowering more women. I think also what we have seen in the increased intimidation and threats and violence against women peace builders in particular needs to be addressed in a very aggressive, I would say, but positive manner, so that we continue to see women human rights defenders on the ground, and this violence against them is unacceptable and must stop. I think also that the increased sustained funding and flexible funding for women programs on the ground for women, peace and security, especially in countries, in developing countries and countries who might not have the luxury of putting that kind of resources for women, peace and security is also critical. I think also we need to look at the increased sexual and gender-based violence against women, especially after COVID. We have heard so many calls by the Secretary General and many of us and many others, and we need to ensure that the fragile gains that we have all gained on gender equality and women and girls' rights and human rights continue to stay and continue to be built up. And I think in the end, the nexus between development, humanitarian work, and peace building is extremely important. And I feel that one of the major links of that are women at the grassroots level and women on the ground in every society and in every country. And we look forward that all these, that the women are and continue to be empowered, but also all the gaps that were mentioned today in this wonderful webinar, that all these gaps can be filled and also can be tackled as much as possible. Thank you again to you, Geraldine, and to Ireland for always coming up with the best webinars that can help provide women peace and security worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Sima. You bring a voice of reason as we listen to how we can mind those gaps that you focus on. But importantly, a country like Jordan that hosts so many women on the move, as you described them, women who have been in conflict and who will go back, hopefully, to situations where they can build peace. We need to focus on women in that family also. And I know I can see on the chat, we're now getting lots of questions as we come to the end of our seminar this morning, our end of our discussion. My colleague Ali Kaba from Sierra Leone has just raised his hand. I apologize again to President Robinson. I'm going to let him jump in for 2 seconds beforehand, because I know it's a country you know well, Mary. And also to say we've had a question from a civil society colleague about stateless women and how they can be taken into account. But Ali Kaba, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Can you hear me? Great. Yeah, well, as always, I appreciate the work that you do here. And this particular issue today is so important. So I'll be very brief because many of my colleagues have highlighted the key point here. For us, we believe that at a time like this, from our experience at Sierra Leone, grassroots women peace builders cannot be sidelined in the process of implementing the WPS agenda. Our experience, especially in our first and now second generation national action plan, has clearly taught us that mapping of women peace builders and women-led peace building organization is a prerequisite for advancing the WPS agenda. We also, from many of our folks here, have learned that we need to make sure that there is funding. The financing gap needs to be addressed at all levels. And we know that since this historic United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, we have clearly underscored the need for partnerships to mobilize resources to fund this particular WPS activities. And we're excited that today there's renewed focus on this issue. And you can count on Sierra Leone's support in this work. And I'm confident that with the kind of energy that we're seeing now, we see that the implementation of the WPS agenda will remain in the forefront of our work here, especially at this historic 75th anniversary of the UN. Thank you so much, Geraldine.
Thank you, dear Ali Kaba, who speaks to us from a country which knows what this challenge is like. So, President Robinson, you have a major task, even just amassing some of the sense of what was said to us this morning, but an extremely rich discussion. You have the floor, President Robinson.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. As you said, it was a very rich, very engaged, very committed discussion. Every voice was committed, which was good to hear. And you gave us some flavor of what was on the chat show, the questions that we haven't time to answer about women with disabilities, about food security, about disarmament, which actually I thought Femzili dealt very well with, about stateless women, about the need, especially to remember that we're talking about building peace from the grassroots. So I'd actually like to go back to some of the points that Becky made from Uganda. She talked about the mental health issues, especially with COVID, and she's right. Huge stresses and mental health. She talked about an intergenerational gap between her generation of young and older women who have some experience. We should bridge that gap. We shouldn't have that gap. She talked about the groups that she's working with to cope. They use groups to cope, and in particular, shelters for women suffering from violence. And she said, we use Zoom to do this, but of course, and she rightly said, there are many women without smartphones who are not part of this. So the digital divide is very real. She said we need more income, increase in funding, and most people mentioned that, and also the capacity for younger women to have their voices heard. So I think these are the things I'd like us to take away. It's building from the grassroots. It's what matters at local level. It's the voice of women who do so much, as I know from Northern Ireland, as I know from experience as High Commissioner in different parts of the world, and more recently in the Great Lakes. Women play such a huge role, but their voices are not heard. I remember the remark that was made, it's become a kind of cliche remark, that we think of, we don't, but sometimes peace negotiations are seen as bad men talking to bad men in fancy hotels in front of television cameras. We know that that's not what peace is about. It's so much deeper, it's so much more rooted in community, it's so much more rooted in the role that women have, and there are more barriers now because of COVID. So we just have to step up and recognize in peace building at the UN level the need to resource more. And I only wish that Femzili's wish that we could get some of that $1.7 trillion, for God's sake, on military spending this year. It's appalling, and it should be diverted to all of what we're talking about on this great panel. So thank you again to Ireland, UN Women, and the network of women peace builders. It was a great discussion. I was so impressed by it. Thank you.
Mary, thank you so much indeed, as always, bringing us back to where we started out, recognizing the real job is working with women rooted in communities who know what peace building every single day looks like and feels like, and not what you described there as the bad men in bad, talking to other bad men in fancy hotels. I'm all against that, frankly. And I think the discussion that we had this morning shows that if there were a few more of those bad men listening to good, strong voices we heard from women and men this morning, we would be further along. So I can say a huge thank you, Gurumila Mahagav, in my own language, to every single speaker, particularly to our three women peace builders, to Becky, Beatrice and Liz, and importantly to our fantastic keynote speaker, President Mary Robinson, my fellow Irish woman. I'm honoured to have yet another opportunity to be with you, and of course to our executive director who guides us and leads us closer to that summit, dear Femzile, as we go. So I also want to thank all of my colleagues who joined in the discussion and civil society who came who came on board. I'll encourage you the next time we're on the screen to put your hands up and speak out. We will provide that forum for you. I want to conclude by saying to you that the report we spoke about this morning is now in the chat box. The link is in the chat box, so you can take that and have a look at it. But the report is not an end in itself. It's the beginning of this conversation. I want to say on behalf of the government I represent, the Government of Ireland, we take this extremely seriously. As the Minister said at the beginning, it's not theoretical for us, it's lived experience. You heard Liz Law at the beginning speak about right up to today, we are still building peace on the ground with women in Northern Ireland and on the island. So we will take that with us to the Security Council as we go, and we will ensure the voices of grassroots women are heard at that table. So thank you one more time. Very much appreciate all of the assistance, and to all of the colleagues from UN Women, Global Women's Network, and my own colleagues, Alexandra and Emer in the background, who kept us all able to communicate with each other this morning. Thank you again. Very much appreciate your time and your presence. Thank you, colleagues. The event is now concluded. Thank you.